Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence these days, but the most important aspect is human intelligence and our authentic intelligence.
You are now listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with your host, Jorge Valenzuela.
This is education coach Jorge Valenzuela. Welcome to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, where I provide all educators, whether instructional leaders or teachers, tips on how to be their best both personally and professionally. Now let's get into it. We are here today with a true education legend, the one and only Matt Miller. Matt is a very well-known educator and education consultant. How are you?
I'm good, man. I've been looking forward to being on this show. Thanks for inviting me on.
For the audience and all the folks out there, I've been following Matt Miller for years. Matt is all over the place, all over X, all over Instagram, Facebook. He's all over the country. And I've always admired his work. Last winter, I believe, Matt, you correct me if I'm wrong, we were both in Georgia, in Atlanta at the GAETC conference. I already looked him up and knew that he was going to be there. So I told myself, I'm going to find Matt and I'm going to say hello and at least get a selfie. I ran up to you. I introduced myself. You knew who I was. And before you know it, we became friends and we even had dinner together with Hidrick Nichols. Yes. And the rest is history. Here we are.
And the rest is history. Yeah, absolutely. No, it was great. It was great.
Matt, you're already well known, but give us your backstory. How did you get into education? And what steps did you take to get where you are now as an education consultant?
I actually wasn't an education major. When I was in college, I was a journalism major and thought that I was going to become a newspaper reporter or a newspaper editor or something. And I basically started out my journalism career covering county government, like county politics. It was terrible. I hated it. But on some of my days off, I would go in with my wife as a teacher. She was teaching middle school social studies. And on my days off, I'd go in with her sometimes. And I started to realize that something just felt right about that. I even thought back to what got me excited about journalism, and it was coaching other writers on their writing. And I'm like, that's teaching. So after a long career of 3 months in professional journalism, I went back to school. So that I could get into education. Even before I had my teaching credential, I was still taking classes in the process and everything. I was hired for my first full-time teaching job on an emergency permit. And so here I am, less than a year from thinking that I was going to be a professional journalist my whole life. And I've got all of these classrooms full of high school kids that I'm supposed to teach Spanish to. I got into it and I really had no idea what in the world I was doing. So I just kept trying to teach by the textbook, keep going through the worksheets and the workbook pages and march chapter by chapter through the textbook and everything. And I started to realize something. I actually developed this little secret. There's a little secret that my students all knew my secret, but the other teachers didn't know my secret, and my principal didn't even know my secret. And that secret was that the students in my high school Spanish classes couldn't speak Spanish. I couldn't speak Spanish. This is a problem. If you're a Spanish teacher, they can't speak Spanish. And I kept thinking, babies can learn a new language without doing verb conjugation exercises. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so I just started trying stuff. Just little by little, I tried to gamify things. I brought lots of technology into the classroom. I tried doing storytelling concepts and conversational Spanish and just tried to mix things up. And little by little, I started to use my textbooks less and less. After I'd come up with all this other stuff, I was like, why do I even have these things?
Is that where Ditch, the textbook, comes from?
That's exactly where it came from. Yeah, it's because in my own high school Spanish classes, my textbooks were actually standing in the way of my students becoming fluent speakers of Spanish. We just started trying new things, and whenever something would work, I'd keep it. And if it didn't work, then I'd just learn something from it or throw it away. And little by little, I didn't need those textbooks anymore.
How did that lead into your consulting work?
After being a journalism major, and I'm a writer by heart, anyways, after teaching for a little while, I started to get the itch to write again. And so that's when I started my blog. And that was back in 2012. I started with a free WordPress.com blog, and it was ditchthattextbook.wordpress.com. Pretty easy for anybody to type in. And so I just started publishing what was working in my class, what I was thinking about, what wasn't working, and what I was learning from it. And little by little, eventually I switched that over to a more concrete self-hosted blog, and people started reading it. I'd share it on social media, and people would sign up for my email newsletter, and little by little, it just kept growing. And I started going out to conferences and presenting. And when I was presenting, I was like, hey, you ought to check out my blog. You ought to follow my work there. And just slowly and organically over time, I found that if you keep showing up, if you show up every day and you do something meaningful and helpful, if you put yourself in people's shoes and you try to help them solve their problems and you show up every day to do that, that people start to take notice.
I always love looking at someone's journey, especially if they've been successful. And I look for the parallels in my journey. What I'm seeing is that you and I have the same story. For the audience, I've never heard his story until today. I just saw the finished product of who Matt Miller is.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at your story, you started in 2012. I started in 2015, but the same exact process. I became a teacher as a career switcher, went back and did all my pre-service workload, learned how to teach, learned the science of teaching, learned brain development, all of those things. Then I started writing and I started bringing technology into the classroom, not meaning to become a consultant, through the blog and having books that opened the door for what I'm doing now. Congrats.
Yeah.
If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button, please hit the like button, and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. And now for a word from one of our sponsors.
We had the pleasure of listening to George this morning on project-based learning, and he shared his story that his aunt encouraged him to go into education. And she was absolutely right. He is so talented at sharing information in a way that's easy to digest and is inspiring to go back and actually implement and make change.
So my takeaway is that Mr. Valenzuela was very inspiring. He was very motivational and helped me to think about a new way of getting my teachers excited.
When I set out to do a workshop, my key deliverable is energy. And this momentum is used to make connections, inspire, educate, and ultimately transform the audience, so that they're compelled to take that same energy back to their schools and communities. And although we have fun, we tackle the hard topics of today, like educational policy, pedagogy for improving curriculum and instruction, and empowering today's students by connecting our work to the needs of the workforce. So please consider Lifelong Learning Defined for your next keynote, workshop, or conference, and overall instructional and educational coaching needs. My name is George, and I hope to connect with you soon.
We would love to have him come and do some work with us and help us be a little more successful and help our students to be more successful.
I move around a lot of schools, and we're seeing a huge disconnect. A lot of teachers that have come from non-traditional pathways, especially in the past few years. And so just interactions, expectations is really the first step. All of my teachers, raise your right hand, and please repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my students. All of my administrators, all my directors, all my principals, all my coordinators, raise your hands, please, your right hand, and repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my faculty and staff. Thank you. Matt, as you mentioned, you're doing a lot of work with educational technology. For the audience that doesn't understand educational technology, EdTech is the acronym, and also artificial intelligence, or AI. Matt, for someone who doesn't understand how EdTech and AI connect, how would you break it down for them?
Some of the issues that we're dealing with today with artificial intelligence are the same kind of issues that we've been dealing with classroom technology, instructional technology, educational technology. It's like the same song all over again. We're just changing some of the lyrics around a little bit because we got all this artificial intelligence that we're trying to wrap our brains around. And AI can do some pretty incredible stuff. You use some of the AI assistants like ChatGPT, and it can explain things for you, and it can help you like tease out your ideas and can come up with writing for you. You've got image generators and even now video generators that can make images and videos for you. And there's even been stuff in the background that sometimes we don't even realize is happening. Your GPS map app suggests routes for you, and artificial intelligence is driving some of that, and even down to little stuff like spell check. We keep talking about, oh, AI is here, AI just got here. No, AI's been here since the late 1990s. It was in the spell check in your documents and you didn't even really realize it.
For the audience, I took artificial intelligence in my computer science program back in 1999, just so everyone knows. Artificial intelligence is to program machines to think like humans.
Yes.
Okay. But generative AI, what everyone's talking about now with ChatGPT and so many different apps, is to use artificial intelligence to recreate or improve something that's already been done, like an image, some ideas that are already on the internet, very quickly gather them and organize them in a way that a human would, but rapidly.
Yeah.
Same thing goes for video and images, as we discussed. All right, Matt, go ahead. I just want the audience to know what we're talking about here.
I appreciate that. Having some of these abilities available to us on our phones and on our devices and everything, especially having them available to students. Teachers are just trying to wrap their brains around it, right? What's its place in education? How far should it go? Is it going to stand in the way of students thinking and students developing skills? Or on the other side of it, what could it open up and empower students to do that they weren't able to do before? And so there's that whole continuum. I talk to teachers that are worried about cheating, and they're like, this is the way that we used to do writing, and we've always done essays, and we've always done this stuff. And, you know, if they use too much AI, then it's not going to work that way. And trying to help them work through that, because that's a fair thing, right? Like, we're trying to help students to think and to develop their reasoning and their critical thinking skills and stuff. But then on the other side of it, it's like asking about the possibilities. What can we do with this that we couldn't do before? We can iterate a bunch of ideas that we didn't before. We can provide scaffolds to students who struggle with writing. We can do all sorts of accessibility and language translation stuff on the fly that we didn't before. That's a world that we're living in right now. Like, everything is there's a lot of things that are being overturned, and, you know, lots of upheaval and everything, and people are just trying to grasp and trying to figure out where all of this should go and what it should be in the classroom, I think.
Also, folks, if you were using Grammarly, if you were using Amazon before 2023, you were already using AI. These tools were AI empowered. Matt, what's the primary message of your coaching work with teachers on using artificial intelligence?
It's multifaceted. I usually like to get into it at first to try to talk to teachers about the efficiency side of things. We've been talking for years about how teachers don't have enough time to do all the things that they're asked to do. Teachers' plates are all full, and we've got way too much stuff, and we just can't get it all done. And it's serious because it has impacts on our mental health. It impacts how we feel about our jobs. It ends up driving teachers. There are really great teachers out there that have wanted to continue to do teaching work that just can't keep up with the stress and the workload and everything, and they decide to do something else. And I think that's the easy first step that I do whenever I coach teachers on AI, is just to say, hey, listen, this can help us generate some lesson ideas. This can help you reduce some of the time that you take to create teaching materials. It can give you a little infusion of creativity. It can help you with your emails and like the tone of your emails to make sure that you don't miss the tone of your emails, because some of us do that sometimes. I think that's the first place that I like to go. But then the second step I like to take is to talk about how it can impact instruction too, right? Because we can use some of those AI assistants. Even if we use them like on a projector screen or on an interactive display or something, we throw them up there and we can use it as a second voice in class. We can have it take the place of someone who works a specific kind of job or something and ask them theoretical questions. We can have it create examples. But what I think the most important thing to do is, whenever we do that with students, is to always have a critical eye on it. Because George, as well as I do, that AI isn't perfect. Really, all you got to do is just watch the news, right? And you watch some of those like really weird AI images that they generate and stuff, and we can see that AI makes mistakes. And so having
It's
that
got like 6 fingers.
eye,
Right. I have a secret. It's a secret in the sense not many people know this.
Yeah.
I want to become a scientist. I will be defending my prospectus by the end of this month. I'll be collecting data in the fall, and I'll be graduating as a doctoral student in May. The amount of things that someone has to understand how to design research, how to carry it out is very pragmatic, and there's steps. And then you have to write these steps within chapters, all of this. For someone that understands that, or even just writing a book, if you have a table of contents and you're mapping out what all your chapters look like, and you most likely have a framework or a model or a system, these are now becoming chapters, or pieces of those are now becoming chapters, then you understand how things work.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that and you try to use AI, you are going to make yourself look like a cheater.
Yeah.
Any teacher knows if a student doesn't understand what the components of an essay are, the opening paragraph, the conclusion, the thesis statement, all these different things. If they don't know that, whatever's AI generated is not going to follow that format unless you tell it to. You have to know what you're doing if you're using artificial intelligence. And I think what you said is the most important thing, not to do your work for you, but to help you think about things and edit things in a way that you couldn't do on your own, or you would have to rely on a bunch of other people that may not be available to you.
Yeah. And there's a balance. And you're highlighting the fact that there's a balance on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like the idea of using too much AI and not using your own human intellect enough. But then there's also, on the other side of it, there's throwing out a lot of the opportunity that AI can use to help you save time and to gather ideas and stuff. And if we don't hit that balance really nicely, if we don't get in the middle of that balance, we miss out on some of the great opportunities of both of them. We can really become like our best selves, I think, whenever we hit that balance just right. And honestly, that's a balance. That balance is a skill that students are going to have to deal with for their entire lives. From K-12 up into higher education and into the work world, it's like, how much is too much? How much is okay? How much is not enough? And whenever they can hit that balance, that's huge. And so that, I think that's our job, is to help them to see where that balance is and when it's appropriate, when it's effective, when we should lean on our own human intellect. That's something all of us as humans are going to have to deal with for the rest of our lives.
Matt, you mentioned using artificial intelligence to help teachers save time. I'm all for that as well. However, I recently saw Ken Shelton on a podcast. I believe it was a podcast, or I'm not sure if it was at ISTE, but he said, be very careful of using AI to save time, but then allowing something else to now take up that time that you just saved. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really brilliant. And here's a quick plug. Ken and Dee Lanier have written The Promises and Perils of AI in Education. If you're interested in AI, which I think you should be, I think you need to pick up this book.
Yeah. Leave it to Ken to say something insightful. He probably thinks it's like a throwaway moment, and it's like something that totally blows us away. Yeah.
I had to think about it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting so much more accomplished, but I'm still working 14-hour days.
Yeah.
I've had to reach a point where I'm cutting stuff off, and I'm like, you know what? As I accomplish X amount of things, I need to leave it alone until the next day. And I need to make my weekends a lot more sacred than they've been.
Yeah. You think about it, people have been doing this throughout all of eternity. What happened after the Industrial Revolution? We start to get all of these machines and machine-powered things and everything that are able to save us time. And then what do? We just pick up more stuff. And then what happens when the internet comes around and we're able to look things up faster and get things done faster that way? What do? We pick up more stuff. And so now here's artificial intelligence that can help us to do some things better. And if it eliminates some of that time burden and we have a little bit of extra free time, what are we going to do with it? That's another key question that we're going to have to ask ourselves, or otherwise what's going to happen? We're going to all end up burned out and worn out the same way that we are right now.
Perfectly stated. And now for a word from one of our sponsors. If you're a STEM and PBL teacher like me, you're always on the lookout for new project ideas and resources. You know George does PBL, and I'm telling you, look no further than SmartLab. SmartLab really has a fresh take on STEM and PBL. I'm proud to be a partner, and they sponsor the podcast. But just don't take my word for it. Check out what other educators are saying about SmartLab.
When students enter into SmartLab, they are allowed to think outside of traditional norms.
It gives them a lot of agency. They feel empowered and important. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the SmartLab environment and the way the project process is set up.
SmartLab becomes this place where they can do those things and have the time and space to communicate better and even deal with social emotional stuff. Like they're having a bad day, a smart lab's a place where we can change the pace of what they're learning to match their mental needs for the day. And that comes back tenfold later on when they want to be there and they want to learn and they want to do stuff and they feel safe and they feel like they can get the things they need.
That's one of the big benefits of being in more of a collaborative environment is it makes you have to work. It makes you have to be accountable.
Please look in this episode's show notes for a link to connect with SmartLab. Matt, let's talk about your book, AI for Educators. For educators, whether teachers or administrators, new to artificial intelligence, what do they need to know before reading your book?
Honestly, not a whole lot. I actually came at this book from the perspective of a busy teacher who hasn't had any time to look into artificial intelligence whatsoever. I come at it talking from the beginning about what it is, but I try not to focus too much on the nerdy in the weeds, nuts and bolts of how it works and everything. We talk a little bit about that, but it's mostly about the implications on education, right? Early on in the book, we talk about how it's probably going to change some things. It's already started to change some things when it comes to classwork and how we do our work and the accessibility benefits that students can get from it and everything. How is it potentially going to change some things? It also talks about some very practical, concrete ways that we can use it. And there's like a whole chapter with 30 different ways that you can use specifically AI assistants like ChatGPT to help you do things in your classroom and get focused and everything. It also gets into the whole academic integrity issue, which honestly is a huge issue. It's something that everybody seems to want to talk about right now, as far as how do we make sure that students are still thinking? How do we make sure that they're still developing skills and they're not just farming it out into ChatGPT? And then the end of the book is like a focus on the future. It's like, where are we going with this? And how can we prepare students for a future where AI is a big part of it? And I'll say this, one little piece out of all of that. I don't think you have to be a computer science teacher to help prepare students for this future where AI is going to be a big part of it. I really think being mindful of its use and talking about it with students. For instance, if you're doing a writing activity and you find that someone has used it a little too much, maybe you just have a conversation with students about what are the concerns around all of that. Or if you put something up there that's generated by AI and you say, how can you tell that was generated by AI? Or are there any little markers? Or even better, like, how would you change this so it sounds like your voice? See, little things like that in the classroom, I think, prepare students for that AI future just as well, if not better, than saying, let's do a 2-week unit on artificial intelligence.
I would agree. Also, folks out there that are resistant to AI, don't forget, there were people that were resistant to email a long time ago. I don't believe that artificial intelligence is going to replace people or their jobs, but I do believe this, and this is just my opinion, based on data, based on the research, based on looking at the growth of artificial intelligence and companies like NVIDIA, like SoundHound Artificial Intelligence. By looking at the growth of these companies using artificial intelligence within their systems, in my opinion, and I'm not saying in education, but in a lot of careers where more companies are relying on artificial intelligence to improve systems. I'm not saying that the artificial intelligence is going to replace those people, but I do believe that people that understand how to leverage AI will replace those people.
Yeah.
Not saying in education, not saying in education.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, I firmly believe that entrepreneurs and companies that aren't using artificial intelligence, I believe that they won't be in business within the next 5 to 10 years. Just my opinion.
I would agree with that. That I think that anybody who knows how to leverage AI and we got to think about what we're using it for too. It's just like any other technology. It's like technology isn't the magic wand or the fairy dust that you can sprinkle over something and then just make it better. So whenever we think about AI, and if we can the more that we learn about it, if we can come up with ways to help us to be more efficient and effective, or to help us to open up new doors and new opportunities, to be more creative, any of that stuff, I think it's just going to elevate education, right? You talked about you talked about email as like an innovation that kind of caught people by storm a little bit. You go even further back, man, in the AI and education discussion, everybody seems to want to talk about the calculator. But I'm about to talk about the calculator again.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, that was one of those big technologies where it was like, oh no, this
Oh,
is going to keep
yeah.
kids from
That's
thinking,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
whenever the calculator came around, it was like, oh, it's going to keep kids from thinking. They're not going to know how to do all these manual calculations. And there was a lot of pushback against it.
Mhm.
But then where are we today? Because we've learned where the calculator fits. We're able to take it to do some of those routine calculations that took forever to do by hand. And now we're able to get through some things faster and be able to understand things. So now we're able to use our time more wisely and push ourselves up to higher levels of mathematics, right? Which makes me wonder, I really feel like artificial intelligence has the potential to do that too, where I'm not sure exactly where it's going to push us to the next level, but somewhere, some way, I think it's going to be that sort of like foundation, that like scaffold that we can stand on to get to higher levels than we ever did before.
Matt, so there is resistance in some schools to get in on AI,
Mhm.
but there's also been a rush to have kids and teachers use AI in some spaces.
Yeah.
As far as implementation goes, what have we learned in the past year since you wrote your book?
That's a great point, because whenever it first started coming out, a lot of it was in theory and we were all still figuring things out. But in the last year, we've been able to do what I think the education community does very best, and that is to take what works and to share it widely. I think that's one of our best opportunities to figure out where AI fits and how it can have the most impact, is to take what works and share it widely. And we've started to see a lot of that. And now that folks have started to use it and try it out and everything. And by the way, I really feel there are lots of teachers out there that are willing to try some of this new stuff. And then when they share how everything went, it benefits everybody. It's like a catalyst. It just like pushes all of us forward because we can learn from their experiences. And so we've seen some teachers use AI on their own to help them plan. We've seen them use it with students, but they're the ones that are driving the AI. They're the ones that are putting fingers on the keyboard and everything. But then we've also seen it where we're connecting students directly to AI. And we're seeing more and more tools now where students are interacting directly with AI. And I think we've learned a few things. One is that we need to be really careful as far as what we're taking away from AI. See, I think we've still got to remember what its place is and what it does and what it's good at and what it's not good at when we figure out how to use it as a tool. Because, see, I think a lot of times people think, oh, whatever comes out of the AI, we're just going to assume that it's fact, and it's going to be like, it's almost like it's canon. It's like the textbook. It's exactly what we teach from. But it's not. All AI is, and George, you know this as well as I do because you've studied it. AI is just an educated guess. It's just a best statistical probability guess on what it thinks you're looking for. And so it's going to get it wrong sometimes. And so I think it provides a fantastic opportunity to do critical thinking, to build those AI literacy skills where we start to look at what does it do, what can it create for us, and how does that fit into our work, but also how does it not fit into our work? And I think we're starting to see that a little bit better. And that's one place that I think we've gotten better over the last year.
What a perfect way to end this conversation on artificial intelligence. Matt, how can people find you so they can book you to speak at their conference, school, or event?
Go to ditchthattextbook.com. That's my website I've maintained for more than 10 years. It's got contact information and some stuff about speaking. And then you can also join my email newsletter too, where I'm sharing practical teaching ideas with teachers multiple times throughout the week in their inbox for free. So if you just go to ditchthattextbook.com, you're going to be able to find all of that.
That's it for a great discussion. Until next time, this is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast. Whether you're a teacher or administrator, you lead by walking alongside your students and your staff. You teach them what to do, you model for them. Let's say you're in a situation where you don't know what to do and you bring in a coach or a resource, you learn alongside them. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the second thing is this. Give your people feedback, not pushback. Whoever you push back on, whether physically or verbally, they're going to do it right back immediately. And if they're intimidated by our position, our status, they're going to do it behind our backs and ruin our programs. My guy. I want to leave you on this note. Trajectories can be changed. When I was in 10th grade, here's a snapshot of who I was in 10th grade. There's a rapper named Rakim. I'm not sure if you guys know about Rakim, but he used to say, it's not where you're from, it's where you at. And I played that on my headphones at 16 years old every day until I believed it. And I'm showing you this because I'm seeing versions of this throughout American schools. This is your reality of what you have to face. If I can do it, any kid can do it, but they have to work hard. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with Jorge Valenzuela.